So there's a new update in California's insurance saga. California's insurance commissioner just issued a one-year moratorium on cancellations and non-renewals for policies in California. Here's what I think this means. Now, this is a complicated issue, and a lot of information is still unfolding, and I'm not an insurance expert, so excuse the brevity. I'm going to try to make it as simple as possible. The state of California is going to force insurers to renew policies for the next year. So they can't cancel or fail to renew any policies in the affected areas or in the adjacent areas, with more and more zip codes being added, and I'm sure more to come. And they're even making this happen retroactively on policies that may have been canceled or said they were non-renewal back as far as October. Now, I get it. It's raw that those people had their policies not renewed or canceled leading up to this event, which, you know, with all intents and purposes was not predictable unless you're the insurance company. So they did what insurance companies are essentially supposed to do, but they are required to provide 75 days notice in the event of a cancellation or a policy not renewing. So those people could have obtained additional insurance. So now, even though the insurance company did what it needed to do to protect its business and gave the proper notice, I assume all of them did it legally, they will essentially now be shaken down by the government and forced to pay anyways. So if you watched my detailed video on this topic yesterday, you understand that they created, through a lot of incompetence, this situation, and now the private sector is forced to cover it. So now it's still early to tell, but considering that this is one of perhaps the most expensive wildfire and highest amount of damage of any wildfire in American history, it's highly probable that this could bankrupt a lot of companies. And hey, maybe it won't, but it will put a lot of financial pressure on them regardless. So just for a second, take the perceived morality out of it. A business followed the law, did what it was supposed to do, identified risk that was not being prevented or mitigated by the state, did what it had to do, issued the proper notices that it would no longer provide this insurance or renew policies, gave the proper 75-day notice. These policies may have canceled or whatever, people didn't have coverage after, and now they will be stuck with that bill anyways. But it's not important necessarily to debate whether or not that is the right or just thing. What's important to understand, which is what I want to focus on, is the moral hazard that this creates for insurance companies of all types, and how this action specifically, will increase California's future homeowners insurance, fire insurance, way beyond even what I thought yesterday. Because now, when pricing their policies, an insurance company will have to factor in the event that there's some catastrophic event, even if we follow all the protocols, even if we follow all the rules, even if we do what we were supposed to do, that they could just come in by decree at the end and force us to pay it regardless. And in theory, let's say your policy got canceled in November and you weren't even paying on it anymore, you still have to cover that person. So when pricing future policies, not only will the insurance companies have to consider the existing risk that exists in these areas to begin with, and all of the other bureaucratic risk of them not trying to prevent or mitigate these disasters ahead of time, but they will also have to factor in the probability that the state will come in by decree, and even though you followed all the rules, all the protocols, all the timelines, that they will still stiff you with the bill despite that. And in order to operate, in order to be in business, you will have to factor that into your costs. It becomes part of the risk profile. And if these companies financially survive this, I cannot imagine how quickly they will be running to leave this state, meaning even less coverage, even less policies, even more expensive premiums for the people who, for whatever reason, decide to stay. And because this has been going on for a long time, and a lot of these companies already left well in advance of this, they actually put together what I'm reading is something called the FAIR Plan, which appears to be a state-backed, basically like catastrophic last resort type insurance that a lot of people started having and a ton of people started signing up to because the other insurance was so expensive. And forgive me as I'm just reading up about this now, but based on what I've read, it kind of seems like if that program becomes insolvent, that now it will be the burden on even more taxpayers, perhaps federal dollars, meaning all of us. And based on what I've read so far, and again, forgive my limited understanding, it also seems that in the event that they become insolvent, they could actually call for additional resources, cash, from the private insurers that continue to stay in the state. So you analyze the risk, you analyze that the bureaucracy is not doing what's necessary to prevent these things from happening. You identify the problem, you identify that it could become a massive risk to your insurance company. You issue the legal policy cancellations or renewals so you could get out of the state or limit your exposure in the state to preserve your business. You do everything the right way. This happens, and now you could end up getting footed with that bill. And then at the end of all of it, you have to be forced to cover those people for an additional year when something like this could very easily happen again when it's more likely to be wildfire season. Then, when you consider what I just mentioned about this FAIR Act and the fact that you could be called even again beyond that because the state program was to become insolvent, you'd have to factor even that into your risk profile. The price of homeowners insurance, fire insurance, and whatever for the limited amount of companies that are going to choose to remain in the state, I can't even imagine why, is going to be so astronomical and cost prohibitive that I can't even imagine what's going to happen next. And though I get it, it's easy to demonize these insurance companies. They're huge. Who cares? It's important to remember that every business starts with just an idea. Typically a private citizen that pooled together resources to start a business and built it up this huge by making the right decisions successfully over long periods of time. These were started by private citizens like you and me. So just remember, the bureaucracy helped and created and exacerbated the problem. Then they're shelling it out to the taxpayers and the private companies to foot the bill and clean up for it. And their solution, their resolution for what they did is to stick them with the cleanup. This is the moral hazard of a bloated, inflated, incompetent bureaucracy. This is the moral hazard of leftist policies. Because not only are they piling on the financial blame on the private insurers and insurance companies of which they have little to no influence of and should not be punished for. I know it's hard to accept that, but it's true. They're going to stick them with the financial burden and blame, but they're also going to stick them with the blame in the court of public opinion. Anything to shift it away from their policies. And when that fails, it's the weather. So when the dust settles and the moratorium ends, the only people that will be able to afford insurance in California will be the wealthy. And in theory, depending on how deep down the rabbit hole you want to go, their plan in a lot of ways to make more space for the elite could actually come to fruition. No matter how you slice it, the state of California is going to be a much different place. The question is not, will you make this decision the next time you go and cast your ballot? The real question is, how loud will they get between now and then?